Yep.
Well then, after quite a delay, we got that figured out. Oh damn. Let's get back in the groove of things. There are bound to be some obstacles on day one. So, happy to be here. First live stream. Gotta learn to be entertaining on the fly. As a writer, I'm usually in this space alone, so it's going to be an interesting experiment for me. Hopefully it's entertaining for you, and worst comes to worst, if I make a fool of myself, honestly, it's probably best for you. Let me let my dog out real quick. Oh, my anxiety was giving her anxiety. So, the mystery of the Pale King. I am psyched to be here talking about it with you guys. Let me get the mic a little bit closer so I can... There we go. Hear me a bit better, I hope. No, if there's audio issues. Awesome. So, mystery of the Pale King, and we probably have a few pets coming in and out. There's one, for instance. There's actually two. That's Honey Badger. She's an old lady. And my other dog is Harley Quinn. After the comic book character Harley Quinn. If you couldn't guess. They will be popping in and out. Hopefully not barking, though. We'll see. So, first of all, who am I? I am Sam Flynn. I grew up in Ohio, Northeast Ohio. Born and raised. Moved to Athens in 2011 to attend Ohio University. And never left. After I graduated, I just worked in the town. I loved the area so much and stuck around and became a townie, basically. So now I work at a local restaurant called Obetti's Red Hot. I work on the night shift, which is good for a nocturnal sort of vampiric creature like me that needs to work at night. Even before I was working there, I was staying up till like 3, 4 a.m., which is, we close at 3 on night shift. So that was a natural fit. Really, I credit having that stability as far as the paycheck goes and fitting my lifestyle to being able to pursue this writing jam that we're on. Cause yeah, you'll never get more alone time than you will at like 4 to like 8 a.m. That's the good stuff. So yeah, there was a big portion after college where I didn't know what I was gonna do. Didn't really want to keep doing journalism, which is what I went to school for. And really loved fiction and always loved fiction, and so I wanted to return to that, and I realized how much that meant to me. And around 2018 I started working on this epic fantasy novel that I wanted to write my whole life. It's gone through a lot of iterations. Started a version of it in middle school originally, and that was a great experience, to say the least, and I learned a lot, and I set it aside to go to college, and after that started writing a lot of different stuff. So when I was coming out of college, I had a bunch of kind of sort of disparate stories and notes, and I was really committed to a lot of them, and I wanted to sort of combine them and create sort of use them to all create a bigger story. They were all sort of intertwined in my head anyway, so it made it a really easy, well, not easy. It made it a fun task, long, fun task, long. So 6 years later, here we are. That book is currently out in Quarry. I finished it over the summer while I was finishing edits on our book today, and that was my mission for a long time until I reached a point where I was sort of hitting my head against the wall, and I needed to step aside from that project to really gain perspective and make use of all the skills that I had been using and sort of been pouring into this single bucket, this book. And that's when the idea for this came around. And that was in the spring of 2022. I was at Futurescape's workshop, virtual workshop, offered. Well, it used to be in person and went virtual for COVID. Now it's a hybrid, I believe. But still does a lot of virtual. They had a lot of success in that field, and I actually attended again this year. Great experience. I had the idea for this book at that workshop. I was in a class. What's known as comps in the publishing industry is just short for comparisons, just in shorthand for what is your book? What other popular things are your book like? You know, so why would it sell? So we were learning about, like, you know, you want to hit the sweet spot. You don't want to go too popular because everyone wants to be the most popular thing, but you also don't want to go too obscure because no one knows what it is. So realistic for your possible success level, but also well known enough to have a broad knowledge base. So we were there and we were having fun, and it's actually a really fun exercise, or at least I found it to be, to take two things and try to find where they go together. You know, find two pieces of fiction or whatever. Really, I mean, you can be whatever, but you know, TV, anime, movies, books. So the comps that got me excited. So the story's sort of origin was. I had been reading about this medieval knight named Gilles de Rais, who we'll talk about more later, and how he had been put to death for performing this play, and he'd been put to death under accusations of occult actions, including child murder. So dark stuff, but extremely strange and compelling as a historical anecdote. And I was thinking about it, and I'd already known about The King in Yellow. And a lot of people probably do from the first season of True Detective, where it sort of popularized it in the modern context. Novel by Robert Chambers from, I believe, the late 19th century or early 20th, about a cursed play. The title refers to The King in Yellow as a cursed play that exists inside the stories that Chambers writes. And so those two things came together in my head, and I was instantly like, well, you know, basically Gilles de Rais, but what if, you know, occult shit was real? Hi, Eddie. This is our troublemaker. This is... Get over here. No. Let's have a talk. Itty Bitty is the troublemaker of the family. Kind of a middle child syndrome going on with her. So that comp got me excited because I was just like, well, that's really frightening and scary on its own. Like, what if this villain is right, or you know, or has magic at his disposal or whatever. And so it all grew from there. I was really compelled by that idea, and I had a lot of ideas built up from the novel that I'd been working on, and used them to sort of streamlined them and recontextualized them in this narrative. I wanted it to be different. The other novel is more medieval, um, inspired. You know, more Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones ish. You know, those are sort of foundational influences for me, so they're never gonna be very far away from my thoughts or whatever when it comes to writing. But with this, I didn't want to make a conscious effort to expand my you know available tropes, and so I wanted to do a flintlock fantasy, which is a short term for like Renaissance or you know, sort of post gunpowder age. Although that's kind of a misnomer because gunpowder's been around for a long, long, long time. Medieval times even, and but basically including that sort of proto-revolutionary period in fantasy. So I wanted to do that, and it really suited it too because I was reading and interested in talking about a lot of American history in this book. I'm an American, born, you know, I wouldn't say I'm a very worldly dude. I've been out of the country a couple of times, but nowhere very far. And yeah, so it's always been sort of something that fiction does for me. Is expand my horizons and show me things that I would not otherwise see in my confines of Ohio. And so that brings us to like the writing process. So when I started, I knew that I wanted. I experimented with trying to make the villain the main character. Doing a villain protagonist was kind of interesting. But that just became like, you're just sort of spending time with a really distasteful dude, and if he's not really compelling on a sort of elemental level, like a Tony Soprano or Walter White or one of these classical anti-heroes, or villain protagonists, frankly, then you're really just gonna be. It wasn't really what I wanted to write. It'd just be kind of boring, honestly. So I wanted to come from the outside coming in. So I had the idea of doing it as someone coming in. There was, in the history, I was reading through the history, and there was people that the church sent, the Catholic Church at the time, or the King of France, both probably, sent to investigate and arrest Gilles de Rais and eventually put him on trial. And so I was like, okay, well, we'll take the perspective of that guy, or that version of him. So yeah. All right, cool. Pause. We're gonna fix the audio real quick. Click. Click. All right. So I think the audio is better now. Had to correct that real quick. Appreciate you sticking with me while I figure out the kinks in the system. So I was wondering, who I wanted to be the protagonist in the story, and so I went to the idea of the investigator, or the person being sent to find out what's going on with this Gilles de Rais inspired character. That didn't quite work for me either, because then I had to take that person's perspective, and that I felt was a little limiting for what I wanted the story to do. I wanted more. I needed a character who was more open to ideas and available for change. I think the older people get, Bishop being an older character, much harder for character arc. That's why young protagonists are kind of a shortcut, admittedly. So I thought, well, who would be accompanying this person? And I thought, well, probably a young page. These people have servants and people who do things for them, following them around, to do the menial tasks and stuff like that. You know, an assistant of sorts. And that person, a sort of maybe starry-eyed, not quite fully mature mind, would be able to take the full picture in of the story in a way that I felt was suitable for what I want, for the story I wanted to tell. Then the story began. The writing really began once I had the character that I wanted to experience the world through. I was able to take that journey with the character and find out the story along the way. And the story ended up being about a kind of a acid trip into America's past, if I had to describe it, and present, frankly. The last 10 years of American politics have been some of the most divisive we've seen in a long time, and it's we've seen the rise of cult-like behavior in many aspects. We see it in our entertainment as far as like what fascinates us. The topic of cults. We see it just in our culture where there are more and more siloed off communities that are less and less connected to each other and more pitted against each other in a lot of cases by bad actors like my Senator J.D. Vance, I might say, and Donald Trump. Don't forget his running mate. They both suck, just to be clear. Absolutely clear. And the poison that they've been pumping into the system is something. It's brought the country to a low boil, and we're seeing things pop off at various times, and them calling out other people for the incitement that they have contributed to. So this whole sort of slow boil made me really need to express this sentiment of American history and get it out of my system in a way. I was reading several books at the time too about it that I'll get into when we talk about the influences in just a few minutes. But first, I want to talk about the publication process, which took about a year. I finished it over the course of about 6-7 months, and took it out to publishers in December 2022, and submitted it over the course of 23. Ended up getting rejected about 8 times before it was accepted by Timber Ghost. I submitted that summer and heard that I was shortlisted in October, and then heard in December that we were going to go ahead with publication. And so that brings us to today. So I want to talk about some of the other influences. I already referenced a couple. Gilles de Rais meets the King in Yellow, sort of the bottom of the pyramid, as it were. But once I had the protagonist and the characters that I wanted to focus on in my head, the structure came to me, and it came to me from Apocalypse Now, which I had just watched, like, the final cuts. There's so many cuts of Apocalypse Now, but the most recent one I watched that Coppola put out, and it got me back into finally read Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad, and to sort of see. I'm always fascinated by the similarities and differences between these two mediums, and the structure of the Journey Down the River is actually a classical. It's an old one. It's not original to, but those are the modern context best versions, you could say, or most well-known versions. And the river, is one of those symbols that goes back in time to represent time itself, and to represent the journey into the soul, to represent change, and it's an elemental symbol. So it's a good thing to hang your story on when you have a structure like that. Something universal that you can sort of rely on. And so the journey down the river becomes a journey into the soul. That's just sort of how these things work. And so I knew then that the journey was going to be into, the soul of not just America, or, this fictional land that is influenced by America, Yorgos, but also a journey into the character's soul, the narrator's soul, Faron. And so I knew then that the two journeys had to mirror each other. They had to interact, and they had to be able to complement each other in a way that felt satisfying for the reader. So going from that, another book I was reading at the time was Blood Meridian, and that went into a lot of the stuff. I read that specifically to get more context for this book, because that actually is also about a young protagonist narrator in Old West, I believe pre-Civil War era America, young man who joins a gang of scalp hunters. It's one of the known as one of the most violent books written, and also an American classic for its prose and its ability to communicate philosophical ideas in a super grounded context. McCarthy actually read real diaries from these scalp hunters in history to incorporate in his story. And of course, there's the famous character of the judge, who's I guess you could say the villain. No, they're all villains in the book. There's no heroes in Blood Meridian. But the judge is sort of the apotheosis. Many people equate him to the devil. Literally, they think that McCarthy intended him to be basically an avatar of Satan. And so that also became a part of the mix in my head. The judge is such a compelling fictional antagonist, and the young character who is counterpointed with him. The judge is a grossly pale, bald, fat, sweaty, but erudite and intelligent and well-spoken and incredibly persuasive, like Satan always is. So, and there's a dichotomy there between the main character who's very illiterate and not well spoken, but at the same time is meant to be resisting, or the inverse of this villain character. And so that became important for me to help define the antagonist-protagonist relationship in the novel. Actually, I have a slideshow I can start too. There's Gilles de Rais. Good old Gilles de Rais, not an actual painting, I'm told by Wikipedia, but a painting that comes from 1835, I believe, and I want to credit the artist. Credit the artist, Sam. Yeah. Eloy Firmin Faron from 1835. So The King in Yellow went over that one. That was a huge influence. Not only that one, but also the play. Someone, Tom Ring, years and years later, I believe late 90s, actually went ahead and wrote the apocalyptic play. It's a very dangerous assignment, I gotta imagine, to write that and give it context and take all the little details that Chambers never, just sort of threw out there and sort of weave a narrative together. Really interesting stuff. Really dug it. I highly recommend, for anyone who's interested in the King in Yellow mythos or that and hasn't heard of it, is highly recommended addition to the canon. So yeah, we talked about Apocalypse Now. We talked about we haven't talked about Mask of the Red Death. Mask of the Red Death by Edgar Allan Poe. Great book, great story. Also a great movie starring Vincent Price from the 60s. Probably the best of the Edgar Allan Poe adaptations that he did. Corman did. Roger Corman. Anyway. The story, as you can no doubt tell, was influential for its title. The structure, there's a certain musicality to it. There's use of color, obviously, too. I also was inspired by the masks, the faceless antagonists, representing, it helps to represent entities or bigger ideas to sort of remove the humanity from these people. And that's what, tried and true, a lot of, fascists try to do. Like, it's funny, all these anti-mask mandates from, like, the last 4 or 5, COVID era. And, anytime you see, like, these Proud Boys out there, always have their fucking faces covered in masks. Go figure. So, covering your identity and removing it so you can be part of a bigger whole is a core tenet of fascism. In this case, obviously, the Mask of the Red Death is more about the insanity of the wealthy and the sort of perversity that happens behind closed doors when you have no contact to sort of I guess what you call the ground level or the reality, what's going on outside your walls, which is a huge thing. The Mask of the Red Death, for those who don't know, is about guy Prospero who invites everyone into his castle and locks it, and they're all gonna have a bunch of fun while the Red Death goes through all the villages and kills all the peasants, and the peasants are outside and asking to be let in, and Prospero just asks them to be shot. Not timely at all. So the critique of extreme wealth and what it does to the sort of psyche, the sort of callousness that it encourages, and that critique was hugely influential then, as it is now, where we see people who just have no concept of the consequences of their actions because everyone is constantly around them telling them they're awesome. Even objectively bad ideas they have. So, moving on. The Dawn of Everything. New History of Humanity by David Graeber and David Wengrow. David Graeber, who passed away, I believe the publication year, I think it was 2020, unfortunately. Really fantastic book, really eye-opening as far as, like, a recent tome that is about what we've missed. Not necessarily gotten wrong, although we have gotten a lot wrong, but opening our eyes to the possibilities that are no longer available because of just the trajectory of history and the circumstances of fate and just random chance and all that. Talks a lot about North American societies, South American societies, indigenous Pacific Islanders, earliest civilization in Mesopotamia, Proto-Indo-Europeans, and goes into ideas of gift economies and the ideas of playfulness when it comes to what we do and how we operate. Not just on a personal level, but as a society. The ability to move to avoid constraining systems that stifle where we want to go, where we want to be, different community organizational methods that were outlawed or just, straight up erased. And so this book goes into a lot of that, a lot of piecing together archaeological stuff from, like, Göbekli Tepe, there's so much. So you get the idea. All that pre-modernity stuff was really influential when I was trying to come up with the sort of world building of the world I was going in. I was like using the old ancient human history to sort of like, well, what if we took like a slightly different path, or what if there was a fork in the road here, and some things remained, today as topics of discussion and ideology. Yep, talked about Blood Meridian. Another journey down the river. Gotta love Journey Down the Rivers. Aguar, The Wrath of God, by Werner Herzog. Fantastic movie. I believe you can find it for free online now. I think it's on like Roku or Tubi. 1974 movie. Never would be made today for multiple reasons. One, it's lead character. I was gonna say character, but the actor too. Both psychopaths, legitimately. Klaus Kinski was a crazy man, and Werner Herzog had a long-standing creative partnership / feud with him. And there's a great documentary called My Fiend in Me, because while they worked together over the course of decades, I believe, they did not get along at every turn, you might say. There were some disagreements, arguments, shootings, and this is one of those examples. And like there's also just recorded animal abuse on the set, so it's like there's many reasons why this is like what we would say today problematic film in its conception and production. However, it is an extremely powerful film, and as an artifact, it is fascinating to look. And it is about the journey. It is about the journey for El Dorado, by based on historical characters that really existed and vanished down the Amazon looking for the fabled city of gold. So it's a fictionalized, what happened to these people. Well, here's one version. And these down the river stories tend to involve the journey into madness. And so Aguar, our main character, is our avatar, and this is actually a very good example of what the Mystery of the Pale King could have been, because Aguar, as the main character, is sort of what I would say is the villain of the Mystery of the Pale King. He is the colonizer traveling down the river in seeking riches and knowledge and power, and using the advantage afforded to him by the sort of primal state of nature to take advantage of people, and it leads to disaster, like these things usually do. Killers of the Flower Moon. Had to read that in the lead up to the movie. When Scorsese's doing a movie, I gotta read the book. And it ties into the whole spiel I was doing about America and how America is, as an idea, has sort of insulated itself from its own violent, blood-soaked history. In many ways to try to differentiate ourselves from others, but in many ways just to avoid, honestly, probably shame, because a lot of awful things have happened that have been deliberately covered up, or whitewashed, or just generally not given the due or justice they deserve. This is one. The Osage murders in the early 20th century to seize the oil rights of the Osage Indians became another touchstone of American colonialism and the pervasivity of white supremacy, the ability and compunction of the dominant racial class to allow the exploitation and violent elimination of a different class, a minority, different skin colors, religious, differences. and the fact that like this, this book and movie came out, relatively around the same time as like Watchmen. We learned about the Tulsa Race Massacre. There is a role in entertainment, and these things for education and to spread knowledge positively in a way that improves the present and encourages growth in the future. And I definitely would credit, this book, and, sort of the first season of Watchmen is another example. There's other examples, but those are the two that come to mind, for lifting in the veil on, the violence perpetrated on people of color, on Native Americans, on Black Americans, on people who were deemed lesser, for whatever reason. And that is never acceptable. And to move on into the future, that needs to be reckoned and dealt with. There was a good tweet I saw the other day. I think it was Jeet here, who was talking about the Haitian debacle community. I'm in Ohio, so it's reverberating around the state. The slander against the Haitian immigrants that have legally taken up residence in Springfield, saying that the conversation shouldn't be about them. What it should be about is paying reparations, us, U.S. being, and France, to Haiti for the centuries of slavery and various other, colonial atrocities committed in the name of resources, power, wealth, etc. So, good stuff. Not good stuff, but, relevant stuff. High Noon. Bet you didn't see this coming. I had a big old Western kick a couple years ago, and this one really stuck with me. It was written in the middle of the Red Scare in the late 40s and early 50s, and there was the House of Un-American Activities Commission was investigating Hollywood for communists and leftists and subversives. And there was a blacklist, and, I aided and abetted by, John Wayne and Ronald Reagan and, people who, you never heard about again. And this movie was written by somebody who was blacklisted and was written about the culture of fear and silence that pervaded Hollywood at the time. And it's told in the context of a Western sheriff on his last day on the job, who's confronted by the arrival of 3 outlaws who are gonna kill him. They're gonna kill him, and he has basically an hour and a half or an hour to prepare, and no one will help him. There's a lot of incisive commentary on the politics and also race at the time, which is incredibly powerful for a film in the early 50s to comment positively on racial dynamics and acknowledge the existence of racial injustice. Very prescient film that I use to sort of communicate the sort of helplessness that the main character feels in that moment when as someone's coming to kill him and no one's gonna help him. Lastly, on our American colonial tour, we have Walker, 1987 acid western film. Great movie in the Criterion Collection. William Walker was a real dude. Lived in the pre-Civil War times. And made it his mission to spread slavery to Central and Southern America. Basically took over as a dictator of a Central American country on behalf of, slave owners and Confederates and all those reputable characters from America's past, and took over, as a white man of a Central American country, and ran that shit right into the ground. Promptly was executed at the end of his reign, and caused a lot of violence and and carnage on his way there in the name of an immoral cause. So you gotta hand it to him for really, really swinging and missing with his whole life. You gotta try to fail that hard. Unfortunately, many people suffered for his actions, and that is the real tragedy here. The movie itself, being made in the 80s and being surrealistic, connects this to Reagan's, the Nixon-Reagan war on drug policy, that involved CIA coups in Central America, and insertions and generally just screwing around with stuff down there, CIA activities and whatnot. Good old Iran-Contra, stuff we don't know about, who knows. So the connection between the film makes the direct connection between the actions of William Walker and the actions in the 1980s, and I think that's an incredibly powerful and prescient point to make, especially it's only grown more relevant 40 years later, I think. Lovecraft Country. Lovecraft Country is great because for all those like me who are big Lovecraft fans, the book is able to take what's best about Lovecraft's work and sort of also contextualize it with his infamous amount of racism. Truly legendary racist H.P. Lovecraft was. More racist than the racists around him, to the point that they told him to stop being so racist because... And this is the early 20th century. So, Matt Ruff wrote a book starring black characters in the Jim Crow America, and made it incredibly compelling to compare the racial violence that these characters are encounter on a daily basis with the Lovecraftian horrors that the story also features. And that has been sort of the journey of cosmic horror since it's become popularized, over the decades. Because Lovecraft, as such a foundational figure, is nonetheless a product of his time, to say the least. And to move forward and explore new horizons, there needs to be progression, and the story needs to keep moving. And so this story keeps the tale of the Lovecraft, the mythos of Lovecraft alive, while removing and acknowledging, but also, I should say acknowledging and including the racism that was only ever subtext in Lovecraft stories. Using Lovecraft stories to communicate American racism became like a real helpful lesson for me. So that book was helpful. I binged Raised by Wolves when I was writing it. Raised by Wolves is a great HBO Max show. It was on HBO Max. No longer HBO Max. It's Max. It's a terrible name. It's no longer on Max either because it was fucking deleted. That's how pissed I am. That's my first F-bomb. But if you can find it, I forget where it is. It might be on a free streaming service at this point. It is a fantastic sci-fi space opera show with great ideas. Anyone who's a fan of the Alien movies will love it. Ridley Scott was a director and producer on the show. Includes a lot of themes from like Prometheus and Alien Covenant, and anyone who's a fan of those movies like I am will really dig this. But the main thing I took away from it was the fanatical cult of sun worshippers. Yes. That was such a tasty idea. I had the notion of like having like a religion just entirely just be basically the sun worshippers, but I hadn't seen it done the way this show did it with the Church of Mithras, which is an actual ancient god, Roman god, that at the time was about as prominent as Christianity at one point. And the show's depiction of that and how it used light as it sort of inverted the light and dark dichotomy, which I was a big fan of. The idea of these dichotomies being limiting and how we can learn more if we sort of flip them or flip them on their head was a tasty idea that I definitely stole. Alright, and lastly, Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer, which is very similar to the sort of journey down the river. There's no river in this one, but it is a journey into another world, so to speak. Even though if that world is also just happens to be an analog for the Florida coast, or the Southern American coast. And these books and their ephemeral, ethereal, just pungent comes to mind. Very, very evocative and full of detail, while also somehow being weird and surrealistic. Was a huge lesson in how to make these strange things feel like they're also real at the same time. And using the environment to interact with the character, using the setting as a character too, is such an important idea, because you can leave a lot on the table if you don't utilize your setting to its full effect. Vandermeer makes his setting as elemental as anything in the story, as any character, and that is a huge lesson that I took a lot of inspiration from. All right, so running a little behind because of the interruption, so I'm going to stick around a little bit longer. Before I do the reading, I wanted to mention that I have a Patreon now. It is available through the link tree. In fact, all the links are available through the link tree at the bottom of the screen. Feel free to follow, DM, let me know what you think of the book. And please sign up for the Patreon. I got new stuff coming there. I want to talk about the journey I'm having with this current book. You know, if you want a behind the scenes look at authoring in the modern age, you know, it's a hell of a thing. But we're doing it. There's a couple upcoming events I wanted to mention. This Friday, I'll be at Donkey Coffee in Athens, Ohio, to celebrate the release. I'll have books there, and there'll be signings and readings there, and get to meet all the wonderful Athens folk who I call friends. October 1st, I'll be in Painesville, Ohio, at Morley Library from 6 to 7. You can register there at the Morley Library website, MORLEY Library. There'll be books available there as well. If you live in Northeast Ohio, I hope you can make it out. And then lastly, my birthday is October 9th. So if you're looking to get me a present, or an early present, or a late present, or any sort of present, the best thing to do would be to buy the book and then share it on social media and talk about how good it is, even if you haven't read it. Especially if you have read it, but, you know, frankly, you know, who checks these things? So, that is my feeling there. I really appreciate all the support I've gotten today on this live stream of mine. And I want to close out with a reading. So, I had two picked out, and I want to decide between which one. Alright, we're going to go with this second one. That's a little less spoily. I was going to go with my feeling, what I felt was the appealing at the moment, and I feel like this one will give a lot of context for the sort of story I'm trying to tell. Hey, hon, you want to listen? Honey Badger's here to listen. Alright. Let me take this off the screen. There we go. So at this point in the story, our character has journeyed to Hathor, encountered a hell of a lot of horror, and is now currently underground with the survivors of the community, who are in a hidden cavern that has existed for centuries, with the history of Yorgos depicted on murals in it. And we are going to take a look at them. When we were distant enough that the fire pit became a flicker, and the glow of Maggie's lantern was all that kept us from being swept up in the darkness, We reached a cavern wall, and she raised the light and illuminated an enormous fresco, colorful, primal, elegant, 10 or 12 feet tall, both carved and painted in a style I had never seen before, baffling me for a moment before I understood what I gazed upon. What first looked like a night sky was a dark forest interspersed with shadowy outlines of people sitting cross-legged, hands held high as if they lifted up the sky. She raised her lantern higher and began to walk along the fresco, revealing the scene as she told the story. Above the first scene was a woman with a giant pair of eyes, long, darting tongue, 6 writhing arms, and a necklace of severed heads. I didn't want to admit she frightened me. I've never seen pagan artwork before. She snorted. Your Gosi call everything they do not understand pagan. To your church, there is no difference between Yord Hathor's cult and our faith. Those sitting in prayer are the Imantaji, dwellers in darkness, ones who modeled discipline, resisted temptation, and mastered self. Only those who achieved total peace and balance within could join their ranks. Your Gosi learned to fear and despise the darkness, but we have no fear of she who is many. In that moment, everything I thought I knew changed. Your creator is a goddess? Nothing so simple as a male or female embodiment or personification. You must look beyond the dichotomies forced upon you, Faron. The church would have you believe there can be only one absolute God, modeled by men like King Leo and Lord Hathor. Our gods would never constrain themselves to one gender or form, particularly one as limited as a human body. Just like the Black Sea between the stars and the darkness of the watery deep, the Divine Mother is infinite possibility, limitless potential. Before all else, there was she, formless, ever-changing, a rushing river, giving and taking both. Without her, nothing could exist. Maggie moved her lantern to the right and unveiled the next scene. A milk-white comet streaked through the image of a Divine Mother, the smoking mountains created by the impact of this ancient celestial event immediately recognizable as the peaks of Hathor. Over the next several murals, the milk-white comet rose and fell from the mountains like a perverse sunrise and sunset, a cycle interrupted by the arrival of men in white, bowing before the shadowy outlines that represented the Mintaji. Those are church missionaries, I realized. When the first Yurgosi arrived, they met with the Imantaji and claimed interest in our laws, our gods. Our leaders were shocked to discover the cruelty with which your people punished the disobedient, the rampant desecration of nature, and disregard for inner peace and balance in favor of material gain. The missionaries were likewise baffled, as if ideas of freedom and justice had never occurred to them. Yorgos had been blessed by the sole creator to be the greatest kingdom on earth, they said. She nodded at me knowingly. Church missionaries spent their lives converting others. They were reasoned, experienced, cogent, the inarguable arbiters of a holy life. Yet I had never learned that they came away from the first meeting with pagans shaken and afraid. What did your priests say? Imantaji teach everything is one life, not just plants and animals, but the air we breathe, the water in the river, and the fire in the mountain. All is Divine Mother, but Yurgosi treat everything as disposable. Stone, earth, animals, even people, their own people. Our knowledge was given freely, as was custom, believing that your missionaries were bereft, and they would be honor-bound to give something in return. My great-grandfather was there, spoke for the sages. He said Yorgos embraced not true freedom, but the chains of absolute power, offering temptation, then punishing those who succumbed, based on belief that all people are evil and need correction. Your way is a trap, he told them. She revealed the final fresco. A pale cloud erupted from a mountain, spreading over Hathor like a wave, and emerging out of the wave at its forefront, a male figure with a white oval for a face and 4 phallic limbs, dissolving into thousands of dots until I realized the man and the wave were made up entirely of dots as well. I swallowed. Is that the hero? She shook her head. What you call the Pale King was never simply a man, no matter Lord Hathor's pretension that he and it are one and the same. Aboard the ship, it came and killed the men with me. Why? What is it? She was very still, and I realized she was afraid. The mountains hide an entity of insatiable hunger and malice, forever severed from Divine Mother. We know it only as the Deadlights. To look upon it is to be driven mad, left empty of morality and feeling, a hopeless husk, a death seeker. In the end, the Deadlights devours itself. I struggled to act like I wasn't scared too. Why? Because death is preferable to a life without Divine Mother. What's happening here in Hathor was the inevitable end of Yorgosi dominance. The man you know as Bishop never accepted the truth about the church he served. The fool thought he could change the priesthood from within. Instead, he became yet another pawn for the king to use and discard. Her voice broke for the first time and only time. She took a deep breath and cast the lantern light on me. Don't fall victim to the same folly. I wouldn't budge. Bishop challenged me to seek the Creator's light even in the darkest of times. Please, understand, who would I be if I didn't at least try to save him? Alive? She put her free hand on my shoulder. Faron, you've seen much since your return. Gluttony, betrayal, murder, and more. What didn't you see until now? The answer came slowly, then all at once. I recalled what Alice just said to me, stranger still in memory. The Pale King loves nothing more than youth. The many sights and revelations since arriving in Hathor, the heroes, extravagant festivities, the bishop's confession, Land's treachery, had blinded me. I did not see what was in front of me, or rather, what was missing. There are no other children in Hathor. Maggie held the lantern close to her face so I would not mistake her words. Your hero takes them to the castle. Children of wealth are held hostage to force a ransom, but for every one of those, many more simply vanish. When the Lord's men came for Yorgosi children, your people did nothing. Nothing while their children vanished, never to be seen again, the disappearances doubling every year. Your hero regaled them with his perverse spectacle. When Bishop came, I had a glimmer of foolish hope, a hope dashed the moment he spoke. The church's pet came not for the children, but because of coin. Though she spoke of Bishop, her comment applied just as much to me. Perhaps that was why I plunged forward with such absurd defiance. I refused to be dissuaded from my mission, a mission I believed was bestowed by the sole Creator himself, and perhaps Divine Mother herself too. I don't want to hear any more. If you won't help, fine, I'll do it alone. I ran away from her, like the foolish child I was, too much like Bishop, both of us pretenders living in different skins, ashamed of where we came from. But you aren't reading this account for pity, are you, dear reader? No. What you want is answers. You want to know exactly what happens in the mystery of the Pale King. I thought I did too. So, that went well. I hope you enjoyed that reading. I tried my best to give it a little flavor. It came out more as I went along, as I got my sea legs under me. Hopefully when we do more readings in the future, we'll have even more voices to share with you, and characters, and all sorts of good stuff. So, I want to thank you all for watching, for if you're here at the end, especially. Like, subscribe, all the wonderful things they say at the end of these videos, but most importantly, if you could, order a book and leave a review on Amazon or Goodreads. Those things really help debut author like me trying to get his name out there, and hopefully get some momentum in this crazy publishing game of ours. So I hope you enjoy, and I can't wait to talk to you again soon. Thanks for staying along.